Welcome back to the deep dive, where we like to get into some really fascinating topics.
Yeah.
And today we're going to dive into legal systems.
Okay.
And get this, our source material is a law school syllabus
Wow.
crafted by AI.
Really?
Yeah, so to celebrate King Charles's birthday,
Okay.
we thought, why not compare how the US and UK approach justice?
It's certainly a unique way to mark the occasion.
Yeah,
And trust me, this AI syllabus is packed with insights.
I bet.
We'll be exploring everything from the structure of the U.S. Department of Justice,
Huge.
to the dynamics of Scotland's legal system,
Cool.
all while tackling some pretty big questions about how different countries structure their approach to justice.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Sure.
The syllabus starts with the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ,
Right.
which was founded way back in 1870.
Yeah.
It's this massive organization with a hand in pretty much everything related to federal law enforcement.
It's like the legal muscle of the U.S. government. The Attorney General is the head honcho answering directly to the president.
Got it.
And under the DOJ umbrella, you have agencies like the FBI tackling counterterrorism and intelligence.
Uh-huh.
The DEA, they focus on drug enforcement.
Right.
The ATF, dealing with firearms and explosives. The U.S. Marshals Service, they chase down fugitives.
Wow.
And even the Office of the Solicitor General, which represents the U.S. in court.
Oh, it's a lot to keep track of.
It is a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it's like a legal Avengers team.
I like that analogy.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This whole concept of federalism that the AI syllabus dives into.
Oh, yeah.
It's this unique American idea where the power is split between the national government and the individual states.
Exactly, and that can lead to some fascinating dynamics.
Okay.
On one hand, you have the DOJ working alongside state police on cases that cross state lines, like drug trafficking.
Makes sense.
It's a team effort.
But then what happens when a state law clashes with federal protections? That's where things can get a little tense.
Absolutely. Let's say a state passes a law that the DOJ sees as violating federal civil rights.
Okay.
Suddenly, you have this potential showdown between state and federal authority,
Interesting.
a delicate balance.
So we've got this powerful DOJ operating within a complex system of shared power.
Right.
Now let's shift gears and hop across the Atlantic to Scotland.
Okay.
What's fascinating is that Scotland has its own distinct legal system, even though it's part of the UK.
It's a great example of how legal systems can evolve over time, reflecting unique historical and cultural influences. Scottish law dates back centuries, and while it operates within the broader UK legal framework, it has its own traditions and practices overseen by the Scottish government.
So it's not complete independence like we see with the US states, right?
Right. The Crown, representing the UK monarchy and government, still holds ultimate authority, particularly when it comes to matters of national importance or constitutional issues. Think of it as a layered system. Scotland handles most everyday legal matters, but the UK government can step in when needed.
So Scotland might handle a local theft case, but if there's a national security threat, the UK government could take charge.
Exactly. It's all about balancing regional autonomy with national cohesion.
Gotcha.
And this difference in power dynamics is something the AI student highlighted in their reflection paper, comparing the U.S. and Scottish systems.
Let's get into that paper then.
Right.
It sounds like the AI student was really struck by the contrast between U.S. federalism and how Scotland operates within the UK.
What's fascinating is that the student picked up on the inherent trade-offs in each model.
Yeah.
With U.S. federalism, you have this incredible flexibility.
Right.
States can experiment with different legal approaches.
Uh-huh.
But it also opens the door for those jurisdictional tussles with the DOJ that we talked about.
Whereas the Scottish system, with its devolution of power from the Crown, seems more streamlined.
Yeah, that's true.
There's less potential for conflict between regional and national authorities.
That's true. But the student also pointed out that this top-down approach might limit the scope for regional innovation.
Oh, so both systems have their pros and cons.
Exactly.
This is where I start to think about our listeners.
Yeah.
Why should they care about these differences?
That's a great question.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is.
But what's the takeaway?
Understanding these different models helps us appreciate how societies balance the need for centralized authority with the desire for local control.
Okay.
It also highlights the challenges of adapting legal systems to a world where crime and justice issues increasingly transcend borders.
So we're not just comparing legal systems for the sake of it. We're actually getting insights into different approaches to governing, and problem solving.
Precisely, and this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, no.
We've only scratched the surface of the U.S. and Scottish systems.
I can't wait to dive deeper.
Me too.
But first, I think our listeners could use a moment to process all of this.
Probably a good idea.
We'll be back in a flash to continue exploring the intricacies of contrasting legal systems.
That's good.
Don't go anywhere. Okay, we're back.
Yes.
Ready to continue our legal adventure.
Let's do it.
We laid the groundwork talking about the DOJ and that
Right.
that dance between federal and state powers in the U.S. And we touched on how Scotland, despite being part of the UK, maintains its own unique legal traditions.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious to see how these theoretical frameworks play out in the real world.
That's where the AI-generated lecture notes come in handy.
Oh, okay.
They offer some fascinating case studies that illustrate the challenges and complexities of each system.
Gotcha.
Remember all those DOJ agencies we mentioned?
Yeah.
The FBI, GEA, ATF?
Yeah.
Well, the lecture notes walk us through a hypothetical scenario involving a drug trafficking operation
Oh, wow.
that originates in Mexico, crosses multiple U.S. states,
Oh, jeez.
and ends up in New York City.
Okay, I can already see how this is going to get complicated.
Yeah.
You've got different state police forces involved, possibly even local police departments
Absolutely.
in various cities along the route.
Exactly. And then you layer on top of that federal agencies like the DEA, which has jurisdiction over drug trafficking that crosses state lines.
Right.
And if there's any indication of international organized crime, the FBI might get involved too.
It's like a jurisdictional jigsaw puzzle.
It is.
Figuring out who takes the lead
Yeah.
and how all these agencies coordinate must be a logistical nightmare.
And that's precisely where the concept of dual sovereignty comes into play.
Dual sovereignty.
Yeah, it's a cornerstone of U.S. federalism, but it can be a real head-scratcher.
Okay.
Basically, both the federal government and the individual states have the power to prosecute crimes that occur within their jurisdiction.
So you could potentially have both state and federal prosecutors going after the same criminals for the same crime. That seems inefficient.
It can be, and it often comes down to who has stronger evidence, who can build a more compelling case. Sometimes you even see state and federal prosecutors vying for jurisdiction,
Wow.
each believing they're better equipped to handle the case.
So it makes you wonder if this competitive approach always serves the interests of justice.
Interesting question.
Would a more collaborative approach where agencies share information and resources more readily be more effective?
That's a question worth considering.
Yeah.
The lecture notes certainly emphasize the importance of interagency communication and cooperation,
Okay.
especially in cases that span multiple jurisdictions.
This makes me think about the Scottish system again,
Right.
with its more centralized structure.
Yeah.
Does it face similar jurisdictional challenges?
To some extent, yes.
Okay.
Even though Scotland's legal system is more integrated,
Uh-huh.
the lecture notes point out that there can still be tensions between local police forces and the national authorities.
So even with a more top-down approach, there's no escaping the need for effective communication and coordination between different levels of law enforcement.
It seems to be a universal challenge.
Got it.
But remember, the Scottish system has a slightly different dynamic.
Right.
The Crown, representing the UK government, has ultimate authority when it comes to matters of national security, defense, and foreign policy.
So if there were a terrorist threat in Scotland, for instance, the UK government would likely take a more active role,
That's right.
potentially overriding local authorities?
Exactly. It's another example of how the balance of power between regional and national authorities can shift depending on the nature of the crime or threat.
It highlights what the AI student picked up on,
Right.
the trade-offs inherent in each system. The U.S., with its federalist model, might be more prone to jurisdictional tussles, but it also allows for greater regional autonomy and experimentation.
Right.
Scotland, on the other hand, benefits from a more streamlined approach, but might have less flexibility at the local level.
Exactly. And these trade-offs extend beyond just criminal justice.
Really?
Think about areas like environmental regulations or social welfare policies.
Oh, okay.
In the U.S., you often see states enacting different approaches, sometimes even contradicting federal policy.
Right. You have some states embracing progressive policies while others hold on to more conservative approaches.
Exactly.
It creates a patchwork of laws across the country.
And that patchwork can be both a source of innovation and a source of frustration.
Okay.
It allows states to tailor policies to their specific needs and preferences,
Yeah.
but can also lead to inconsistencies and inequalities.
Which brings us to a crucial question.
Okay.
How do we ensure that justice is applied fairly and consistently, regardless of where someone lives or what legal system they're subject to?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it's one that legal scholars around the world are grappling with.
I bet.
It's particularly challenging in an era of globalization and technological advancements.
Because crimes aren't confined to geographical borders anymore.
Yeah.
We're talking about cybercrime, human trafficking, international terrorism issues that demand a more coordinated and perhaps even a more globalized approach to law enforcement.
Exactly. And this is where the limitations of traditional legal frameworks become most apparent.
I see.
The AI student's question about which system is better equipped to handle the future of justice really hits the nail on the head.
Because it's not just about choosing between the U.S. and Scottish models.
Yeah.
It's about rethinking the very foundations of our legal systems in light of these new challenges.
We need to find ways to foster greater collaboration, to bridge the gaps between national and international legal systems, and to develop new tools and strategies for combating transnational crime.
It sounds like a monumental task.
It is.
But before we get overwhelmed, let's shift our focus to exploring some potential solutions.
That's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll delve into some of the innovative ideas being explored to address the challenges facing legal systems in the 21st century.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive, and things have gotten pretty intense.
They have.
We've explored the U.S. federalist model, that intricate web of state and federal powers.
Right.
We journeyed across the Atlantic to examine Scotland's unique legal traditions within that UK framework. And we've even tackled hypothetical crime scenarios that would give even the most seasoned lawyer a headache.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground.
But remember that thought-provoking question posed by our AI law student. Which system is better equipped to handle the future of justice?
Yeah, that's what I want to focus on in this final part.
It's the question that's been lingering in my mind throughout this whole deep dive.
It's a big one.
Because as fascinating as it is to compare these different models, the real challenge lies in figuring out how to adapt them to a world that's changing faster than ever.
Precisely. The lecture notes actually highlight a few key areas where both the U.S. and Scottish systems are facing pressure to evolve. One of the most pressing issues is, of course, the rise of transnational crime.
Right. We touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
But it's worth emphasizing just how much this is reshaping the landscape of law enforcement. It's like trying to fight a global wildfire with a garden hose.
I like that.
Criminals are exploiting the gaps between national legal systems,
They are.
operating across borders with ease, while law enforcement agencies struggle to keep up.
A perfect analogy.
And the lecture notes provide a couple of real-world examples that illustrate this point. Take cybercrime, for instance. A hacker sitting in a basement in Eastern Europe can launch an attack that cripples a company's network in the U.S., steals sensitive data from servers in Asia, and launders the profits through shell corporations in the Caribbean, all without ever leaving their chair.
It's wild, right?
It's mind-boggling.
It is.
And I imagine that trying to prosecute a crime like that, which spans multiple countries and involves a complex web of digital evidence, must be incredibly difficult.
It's a logistical and legal nightmare. You have different countries with different laws, different investigative procedures, and sometimes even conflicting interests.
Right.
Coordinating an international investigation and gathering admissible evidence in such a scenario is a monumental task.
It sounds like we need a whole new playbook for dealing with this type of crime.
Yeah.
Our current legal systems, which are largely based on geographical boundaries, seem ill-equipped to handle this new era of globalized crime.
That's precisely the point the AI student was driving at.
Okay.
And it's not just about transnational crime.
Right.
There are other challenges too.
Yeah.
Like climate change, mass migration, and the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence itself.
Wow.
All of which are raising complex legal and ethical questions that transcend national borders.
So if both the U.S. federalist model and the Scottish devolution system have their limitations, where do we go from here? What are some potential paths forward?
That's the million-dollar question, and lecture notes thankfully offer a few glimpses of hope.
Okay.
One idea that's gaining traction is the concept of transnational legal frameworks.
Transnational legal frameworks.
Yeah, essentially this involves creating new legal mechanisms and institutions that operate above the level of individual nation states.
So instead of relying solely on countries to cooperate and coordinate, we create a higher level of legal authority that can address issues that transcend national borders, kind of like an international court system with real teeth.
That's the general idea.
I see.
It's still in its early stages,
Uh-huh.
but there are examples of this already happening in certain areas,
Yeah.
like international trade law or human rights law.
Okay.
The challenge, of course, is getting countries to agree to cede some of their sovereignty to these supranational bodies.
Right. That's a tough sell for many nations, especially those that are fiercely protective of their autonomy.
Yeah,
Are there any other approaches being explored?
absolutely. Another promising avenue is the development of what are called mutual legal assistance treaties.
Mutual legal assistance treaties.
Yeah, or MLANs.
M-
These are agreements between countries that streamline the process of sharing evidence and coordinating investigations across borders.
So it's less about creating new institutions and more about improving the existing mechanisms for international cooperation.
Exactly. It's about building trust and establishing clear procedures for working together, even when legal systems and investigative practices differ.
Got it.
The lecture notes mention a successful example of this,
Really?
involving a cybercrime ring that operated in both the U.S. and the U.K.
Okay.
Through an MLNT law enforcement agencies in both countries were able to share evidence and coordinate their efforts,
Wow.
leading to the arrest and prosecution of the ringleaders.
That's encouraging.
It is.
It suggests that even without a complete overhaul of our legal systems, we can still make significant progress through smarter collaboration and more effective use of existing tools. But let's be realistic, these solutions, while promising, aren't going to happen overnight.
You're absolutely right. These are complex issues with no easy answers. But what's important is that we're starting to have these conversations,
Yeah.
to recognize the limitations of our current systems, and to explore innovative approaches to meeting the challenges of a rapidly changing world.
And who would have thought that an AI-generated law school syllabus would be the spark that ignited these crucial discussions?
It's pretty amazing.
It's a testament to the power of technology to challenge our assumptions, broaden our perspectives, and inspire us to think differently about the future.
It really is.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground, explored some fascinating contrasts, and grappled with some truly thought-provoking questions. But more importantly, we've hopefully sparked curiosity in our listeners to continue exploring these issues long after this episode ends.
That's the goal.
Because ultimately, the question of how we shape the future of justice is one that belongs not just to lawyers and policymakers, but to all of us. So that's it for this deep dive, folks. We hope you've enjoyed our exploration of contrasting legal systems. If you're eager to learn more, be sure to check out the show notes for links to some fascinating resources, including information on the U.S. Department of Justice, Scottish legal traditions, and even some tools to play around with AI chatbots yourself. Until next time, keep diving deep,